She is the most mysterious of the ancient goddesses, but who was Hecate? Ancient writers didn't agree.
One described her as a horrifyingly ugly giant, 100 meters tall with a single scaly foot and snakes for hair.
Another claimed she was a flame of pure divine light by which God created the universe.
I've felt confused about Hecate doing the research for this video. Often she's described as the goddess of magic, but in the ancient world, her personality, her character as a goddess, is hard to pin down.
Does she protect people from the ghostly dead, or help haunt them? Is she powerful and beautiful beyond your imagination, or can your local town sorcerer summon her outside the city rubbish dump?
This clash between the divine and profane seems to mark out Hecate as unique in the ancient world, but there's a reason for this yo-yoing.
It's the same reason Hecate was connected to magic. She became the goddess of nowhere and everywhere, of the in-between places where nothing was certain.
If we imagined Hecate like the ancient writers did, today should be the goddess of deserted shopping malls, hospital wards, and the back rooms. The goddess of liminal places.
In this video, I want to show you how Hecate evolved from a great goddess in ancient Turkey into a source of liminal horror and awe in the late Roman Empire, laying the foundations for the ideas we have about her today. This is why over 1,000 years later, Shakespeare would reference Hecate as goddess of witchcraft. Hi, I'm Josh and welcome to Bluefawn, an AI-free channel where we look at religious and esoteric history. If you want to immerse yourself more in the world of these videos, my historical fantasy novel is now available on Amazon. Enjoy.
Now in the video on Egyptian Heka magic, a lot of you had the bright idea of connecting Heka to Hecate. And the good news is, you're not the first people to make that connection. Ancient Greeks and Egyptians thought in a very similar way to you.
But it's unlikely Hecate actually originated in Egypt, despite similarities in names. From the little evidence we have, it seems more likely she was a variant of the great goddess cult in ancient Turkey.
Now if you watch the video on ancient Rome's cruelest cult, you'll get a clearer idea of what worshipping these Anatolian goddesses might look like. Violent, frenzied dancing, gender-bending priests, and a deity connected to the natural world, wilderness, wild animals, birth and death, an earthly, all-powerful goddess.
Perhaps, like the other great goddesses, for example Cybele, she helped people through transitional states, from the womb, from adolescence to adulthood, and finally on to the afterlife.
But Hecate, the great goddess, was also tied up with political power. Her cult was endorsed by the state.
When we start to get more archaeological evidence for Hecate in Caria, we find records of adolescent girls carrying sacred keys from her temple complex in Laginia to the great city of Stratonicia. The pilgrimage was a way of reminding everyone of the territory controlled by the Stratoniceans, as well as Hecate's power over the keys to the underworld. The political popularity of Hecate led her to appear on a series of coins in the area around 180 BC, first in Stratonicia and later further east in the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. What you'll notice in these images is that Hecate is singular. There are no three-faced Hecates in Asia Minor, the way she would come to be known in Greece. We're tapping into the original tradition of the great goddess Hecate. If we accept that Hecate entered Greece as a foreign goddess from Asia Minor, we still have to make sense of some very confusing evidence.
There is no mention of Hecate in Homer's great poems, the Iliad or the Odyssey. Even when gods and magic are mentioned, she simply does not exist in these stories. But it's in another poet, Hesiod, writing around the same time, 700 BC, that we first start to hear about Hecate in Greece.
Hesiod, writing at the same time as Homer, includes a long hymn to Hecate in his epic poem, the Theogony. Hesiod described the origins of the universe and the Greek gods. He tells the story of how Zeus and the Olympian gods overthrew Cronus and the Titans, casting them into a deep pit where they are trapped forever.
In Hesiod's poem, Hecate is also a Titan, one of the old gods born long before Zeus, but instead of defeating her, Zeus gives her more power and honor than anyone else.
Zeus gave her astonishing gifts, power on earth and in the ocean depths, and in the starry heavens amongst the immortal gods.
Only Hermes, messenger of the gods, can move between these realms so easily, but Hesiod isn't finished.
If you offer her sacrifices and pray to her, great honor and wealth will come to you. She sits next to kings in judgment, and when the people discuss things, she decides whose idea will be accepted. In battle, she decides who is victorious and who receives the glory, and at the games, she is especially good at helping athletes win. And during chariot races, and even for fishermen in the wild sea, she can give them a huge catch or take it away just as easily. If you're looking to increase your herds, she can turn a couple animals into droves of goats, sheep, and cattle covering the hills, and on top of all of this, she is the nurse of little children who first open their eyes and see the dawn.
Hecate disrupts the spheres of the Olympian gods. She seems to be stepping on everyone's toes. Ares, god of war, Poseidon, god of the ocean, Demeter and Persephone. It's no wonder people skip through this part of the poem to get on to the gods we know better. What's going on here?
There is a theory that Hecate was especially popular in Hesiod's hometown, and his poetic detour, arguing she is the bestest of all gods, is a way to big up his local temple. I'm not completely convinced by that.
I think what Hecate is trying to do is to find a way to fit the Anatolian great goddess tradition into Greek polytheism, and it's not easy. Another great goddess from Anatolia, Cybele, had several temples in Greece, but she was never incorporated into Olympus. The fact is, the claims made by these goddesses were so ambitious and extraordinary, it was difficult to fit them into Greek polytheism.
In the Theogony, Hesiod's solution is to give Hecate everything and nothing. In the process, she becomes the goddess of personal advantage. Since she can move between the three realms, there's some justification for this.
Battles, politics, fishing trips, competition, human and animal reproduction are all things with uncertain outcomes.
Hesiod places Hecate in these liminal spaces before the high-stakes outcome. She offers control and reassurance. Sadly, we don't know if the poem reflects popular practices or just Hesiod's personal recommendation. The earliest identifiable statue of Hecate in Greece is from the 6th century BC. She is seated on a throne like a great goddess, but apart from this, it's a rather nondescript image. Early Greek depictions of Hecate are surprisingly bland. On jars she wears a long dress and holds 2 torches, showing her role in guiding souls after death.
In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, we see Hecate being integrated into the story of Persephone. After the young woman is abducted by Hades, Demeter begins searching for her lost daughter. Luckily, Hecate has seen the whole thing from her cave, and she can point Demeter in the right direction.
When Persephone is allowed to return, it is Hecate, with her 2 torches, who guides her out of the underworld. The hymn writer calls Hecate tender-hearted. She appears as a kind of divine auntie who looks after young women as they're growing up. The abduction of Persephone was a central myth of ancient Greece's most popular mystery cult, the Mysteries of Eleusis near Athens. A little temple to Hecate was built at Eleusis.
Hecate was well known enough to merit inclusion at the Mysteries at Eleusis, but her depiction there is still fairly nondescript. Perhaps it was a decision motivated by popular demand.
Outside the temple complex, a darker Hecate was forming. Perhaps this grim image of a frightening Hecate came from attempts to connect her with other goddesses like Artemis and Enodia.
Like Artemis, Hecate was depicted with packs of dogs, and like Enodia, she was sometimes said to be riding a horse.
However, the Greek Hecate was not formulated in a temple by priests and priestesses. She emerged in the popular consciousness through her connection to folk religion. Driven to the margins, the liminal, all-powerful goddess came readily to hand in the wise woman's hut, or when scratching a spell on a piece of pottery.
More than all the other gods, her great power was accessible to common men and women. Wasn't that what Hesiod told us?
If you want to understand the new iconography of this Hecate, I think you need to imagine the liminal spaces in ancient Greek society. You walk outside the city walls in the evening. The guards eye you suspiciously. There are a couple of merchants arriving with a donkey. Apart from that, the road is empty. You walk for a while. On your right is one of the city's stinking trash heaps. You can smell rancid oil and hear the scraping of broken pottery as a pack of wild dogs rummage through the filth. A little further you reach a crossroads, a great place for robbers to spring an ambush. The shadows are long now. The pole in the middle looks almost like a person. You hear the dogs barking. You can smell manure spread over the fields. No wonder they say the souls of the vengeful dead wander these empty places. Who would you pray to here? Apollo wouldn't get his hands so dirty. Zeus wouldn't stoop so low. They live in their temples in the city, smelling braised meat and incense. But Hecate, she has a kind of earthly practical power which can keep you safe, even here. The liminal state of the traveller on the outskirts of the city was Hecate's business. People sometimes left offerings to her at crossroads. In ancient Greece, these were usually points where three roads met. Sometimes a mask would be hung from the pole in each direction. Whatever road you were taking, she had it covered. Around 425 BC, Alcamenes, the great sculptor, made a statue to stand at the entrance to the Acropolis in Athens. It showed three women standing back to back and facing outwards. The clothes were stiff and linear. It was designed to seem ancient, like an artifact dug up from 100 years ago. In fact, it was the latest thing. The new image of Hecate had crystallized.
In Aristophanes' play The Wasps, we're told that one of these statues stood in front of every single house in Athens. Now, this may not be that much of an exaggeration. Archaeologists have found lots of these three-faced Hecate statues, all beginning in the 5th century BC.
During this period, Plato famously complained about rogue mystery cult priests offering private magical ceremonies to the rich. Alongside official religious events, an underground magic economy had developed in cities like Athens. Hecate, of course, fit right into this informal religious scene. To ancient Greeks, her name sounded like their word for hundreds, kind of like our equivalent of millionaire. Yes, for a small fee or the right spell, Hecate could get you rich. There was a cost to Hecate's place and popularity. Gradually she began to be associated with the things she had protected people against. Did she calm the unquiet dead? Or lead them through the barren wastes on a wild hunt?
Hecate also became associated with the real inhabitants of liminal spaces. The destitute and the outcast would rush to consume the food offerings there for her at crossroads if they could get there before the packs of mongrel dogs.
A series of myths about her followers seemed to focus on socially ostracized women, husband murderers, those unable to give birth, and the incontinent were transformed into ferrets and polecats and given over to Hecate's care.
Anyone using dark magic designed to manipulate or control others was shown calling upon Hecate. This is what Samosata does in Theocritis' second Idyll, when she goes to a crossroads at night and casts a love spell to try and get back her neglectful boyfriend.
Hecate, O dweller in the shades, at whose approach even the dogs quake, as she moves through blood and darkness and the graves of the dead. All hail, dread Hecate.
It was in Ptolemaic Alexandria, the capital city of the Greek dynasty who ruled Egypt from 300 to 30 BC, that dark Hecate took on her final, monstrous form.
Here, submerged in a heady mix of Egyptian Heka magic, Jewish mysticism and Greek theology, Hecate turned into a monster a skilled magician could conjure up with the right words.
Since sorcerers in this period often tried to use the dead as intermediaries to get concessions from the gods, Hecate, with her underworld connections, was a perfect choice. In this spell, where a magician uses the souls of dead gladiators to try and force someone to love someone, we find this disturbing list of dark Hecate's attributes.
I'm giving you an offering of food, three-headed goddess, lady of night, who feeds on filth. O virgin, key-holder, grim-eyed, dreadful with fiery serpents, you, lady, who feeds on filth, Cause her wretched pain until she does what I command. O mistress Hecate, O lady of the crossroads, O black bitch.
It wasn't all obscenities. These Greco-Egyptian magicians also connected Hecate to Selene, the moon goddess, in a way the Greeks never had. She was also seen to be one with Artemis and Persephone and the Babylonian deity of the underworld, Ereshkigal.
Come, beloved three-faced Selene, hear my secret chants. Fierce dogs are dear to you, which is why I call you Hecate, many-named, dart-shooter Artemis, and Persephone. Beginning and end you are, you alone rule all. The importance of Hecate to these magicians cannot be underestimated. Rings bearing three-faced Hecate were a key part of their toolkit.
But despite using her as their route for spiritual power, there was a sense in which Hecate's accessibility kind of cheapened her. She could be invoked for any old reason, no matter how banal or selfish. Hecate, the ruler of all, had no agency of her own. It was the magician with the perfect words and formula who controlled her actions. She seemed to fade into the magician's shadow, taking on the form of her own familiars.
Draw Hecate with three heads, one of a cow, another of a dog, and the middle of a woman.
This kind of magical literature was begging to be made fun of, and it was long before one of the ancient world's great satirists had a go.
Lucian of Samosata, writing around 150 AD, told two stories involving Hecate. In the first, a young man has the hots for a girl, so he hires a powerful magician who promises to make her fall in love for a fee. The ritual is needlessly complex and contrasts with the guy's immature desire. First, the sorcerer raises the man's father from the dead and convinces him to help.
Then he conjures up Hecate, who turns up with the three-headed dog Cerberus from Hades, all to help out this young man's love life. The spell is a success, the girl appears, and Hecate pops back down to Hades.
In the second tale, a man encounters Hecate on a walk through the woods. She is absurdly awesome, 100 meters tall with dogs the size of elephants, snakes for hair, and a horrifyingly ugly face.
Luckily, he has a little Hecate ring on him, which he presses into his palm. Mega Hecate is rendered helpless by it. She has a tantrum, stamps her one scaly foot, and opens up a chasm in the earth, which sucks her back down into Hades.
These stories use contrast and irony to show the absurd aspect of the dark Hecate magic, which was so popular at the time. But not everyone reacted to this the same way. Julian the Theogist, a contemporary of Lucian, was interested in Neoplatonic philosophy. He didn't consider himself a crude sorcerer, but rather someone who tried to encounter the mysterious divine forces.
Through a series of religious trances, he spoke the Chaldean oracles, a complicated collection of philosophy poetry. One name that reoccurs again and again in the remaining fragments is Hecate. But this isn't the monstrous black bitch of the Greek magical papyri. The Chaldean Hecate is a tongue of pure fire and light.
Hecate's role in the Chaldean oracles can't be summarized easily. For one, she is the womb in which the pure thoughts of the first divine force become the material world. It is the dispenser of life-giving fire which fills up the womb of Hecate, source of all sources, the womb which contains all.
But Hecate is also the heavenly mediator between the first and second divine forces.
Hecate is born in the midst of the fathers. On her right gushes a great stream of the primordially generated soul, spilled light and fire and ether and the world. On her left is the perfect source of virtue, which remains untouched and unblemished.
Caught up in this complex mystical philosophy, Julian rescued Hecate from the magicians, creating a Neoplatonic goddess of the liminal in-between, divine and beyond human comprehension, but probably not very useful if you wanted to win a chariot race.
The Chaldean oracles remained very popular with philosophers in late antiquity, but it was a second Julian, a Roman emperor, who brings our story of this ancient goddess to a close.
Ruling in the 4th century, and worried about the rise of Christianity, Julian spent a good deal of his time trying to revive paganism and inject some kind of enthusiasm into its rituals. One of his favourite topics was the great goddess tradition from Anatolia, and in his hymn to the Mother of the Gods, he seems to draw on Hecate as well as Rhea and Cybele in praising the divine female force.
O Mother of gods and men, who shares the throne of Zeus, who gives good things to the gods and fills the earth with life and matter, in all the affairs of state and the army, grant me virtue and good fortune, in the good hope that it is to you that I journey. At the very end of late antiquity, just before Christianity became an irresistible force, Julian seems to be bringing Hecate back to her Carian roots.
He visits a temple of Hecate and, under the guidance of a priest, sees the statue move and fire leap from the torches in her hands.
The state-approved great goddess Hecate was back, but her return was short-lived. A few years later, Julian was killed on the campaign trail, and the priest who revealed those mysteries to him was executed by a Christian emperor.
The Hecate who would survive in the now Christian world was the goddess on the margins, in the liminal in-between, hiding in the cracks on the threshold where folk tradition and magic had slipped. So what do you think about the goddess Hecate's origins? Was it what you expected? Or maybe you disagree with me in my interpretation of the evidence? Let me know in the comments. A big thank you to our channel members who help me keep producing these videos. Next time we'll be looking at one of Hecate's most frequent companions in the ancient world, the witch. See you then.